The meeting on Orvin Prime. The Orvin Prime diplomatic station shimmered against the black backdrop of space like a peaceful gem. From the outside, it looked calm, but inside, the air was thick with tension. Representatives from 17 alien civilizations gathered around the curved negotiation chamber, seated by their species' rank and power. It was supposed to be a peace summit, but everyone knew it was anything but. Ambassador Siler Threx of the UVAC coalition adjusted his breathing tubes and scanned the room. His species, known for logic and cold neutrality, had little tolerance for chaos, and this summit was crawling with it. To his right, the brute warriors of the Targ Empire snorted in impatience. To his left, the venomous delegates from Xinha clicked their mandibles every few seconds in irritation. Then the doors opened, and in walked the human. He was small, not just by Targ standards, by everyone's. Unarmored, no visible weapons, no body modifications or exoskeletal plates like the Kravoks, just a pale-skinned figure in a tailored black suit. His brown eyes scanned the room, steady and unbothered. That was Jace Riven, the first human diplomat ever allowed to represent Earth at this level. The room quieted, but not from respect, from confusion. Is that the representative from Earth? One of the Xinha whispered, barely concealing the hiss of amusement. He looks like a hatchling, muttered a Targ general. Jace heard it. He just smiled and made his way to the only empty seat, between the Kravoks commander with claws like scythes and a Yulgani noble whose skin pulsed with shifting color. Siler watched him curious. Earth had been silent for years, avoiding these intergalactic gatherings. But now they had sent this? The smallest species in the room. Physically fragile, biologically unimpressive. No natural armor, no venom, no claws. It was, frankly, insulting. The session began. Standard formalities. Each delegation reintroduced its position regarding the disputed planets in the Cyrix corridor. The Targ, of course, demanded full sovereignty. The Yulgani argued for shared resources. The Kravoks threatened violence if their ships were denied access. Jace remained silent. Then the Targ general slammed a massive hand on the table. This is a waste of time. Let us settle this in combat. The old way. Several delegates murmured, in approval. Others voiced disapproval. The room heated up fast. That's when Jace stood. Siler expected a timid plea for calm. Maybe a formal protest. What he got instead was silence. Jace didn't speak right away. He simply placed both hands on the table and looked directly at the Targ general. I understand your frustration, he said calmly. But let me ask something. What happens after the combat? After the bodies cool and the ships burn? What then? The general growled. Then we win. Jace nodded. Right, but who governs the ashes? Who rebuilds the stations? Who explains to the civilians why their water systems don't work because you needed to prove strength? The general rose to his feet, towering, muscles bulging under hardened flesh. You mock me, little man. No, Jace replied. I'm offering you an alternative, one that doesn't end in blood. The general slammed his fist again. The room shook. Earth is a death world, isn't it? You speak of peace but evolved on a planet filled with poisons, volcanoes, earthquakes, diseases, and predators that eat their young. Jace's face didn't change. Yes, we did. And that's exactly why we don't need war to prove strength. That line, delivered quietly, hit harder than any shout. Even Siler blinked. There was a long pause before the Kravoks commander leaned in. You hide behind words, human, he said, voice thick and slurred through translator implants. You come with nothing but your tongue. What threat are you? Jace finally smiled, slow and unsettling. Let me ask you a question. What's the most dangerous thing in this room? The Kravoks scoffed. I am. No, Jace said, still calm. It's the one you underestimate. It's the quiet one who waits, who listens, who plans. On Earth, that kind of patience kills. More than rage ever did, the Xinha delegate hissed again. But this time it wasn't amusement. It was discomfort. Jace sat down. The room didn't erupt. It stayed eerily silent. Siler leaned to his aide. "What intelligence do we have on this Jace Riven?" The aide swallowed. "Very little, but he's been involved in 3 high-level negotiations that nearly ended in war. All of them were resolved without a single shot." Siler narrowed his eyes. "Or maybe without a shot we know about." He watched as Jace leaned back in his chair, hands folded, completely at ease between 2 monsters. And for the first time, Siler wondered if the smallest figure in the room might actually be the most dangerous one, the weight of silence. The summit resumed after the brief recess, but something had changed in the room. No one said it aloud, but every species present now watched Jace Riven with a little more caution. Even the Targ general, who had thundered threats moments earlier, leaned back with folded arms, reconsidering his next move. Jace, on the other hand, remained calm, calmer than anyone had a right to be in a room full of creatures that could tear him in half with a twitch. The discussions moved to resource allocation. Delegates argued over star routes, mining rights, orbital security. The Kravoks accused the Yulgani of manipulating navigational beacons. The Zinha claimed that asteroid mining by the Targ was collapsing fragile wormholes. Voices rose. Mandibles clicked. Threats edged into every sentence. And Jace stayed silent. Not inattentive, just watchful. His eyes moved from delegate to delegate, studying the flow of pressure points. His expression never changed, but his pen scratched down quiet notes in a paper notebook. Paper, of all things. Some delegates chuckled at the novelty. Others were unnerved by it. Ambassador Siler Threx couldn't help but observe. His people prided themselves on emotional detachment. But this was something else. Jace didn't suppress emotion. He absorbed it. Let it pass through him like a current, then redirected it with eerie precision. The Kravoks commander finally snapped. "You sit there and say nothing, human. Are you mute or just afraid to be wrong?" Jace looked up from his notebook. He didn't flinch. "Neither," the commander hissed. "Then speak. Defend your Federation's position. Or is your silence all you have?" Jace stood again, this time more slowly. He set his notebook down, his gaze focused and sharp. "I don't speak," he said, "because words here are wasted. Everyone is posturing, positioning, performing. You shout so loud to prove strength that you forget silence is a weapon too." The room quieted again. Delegates exchanged glances. The Yulgani noble blinked 3 eyes at once. "You assume I'm here to argue," Jace continued, stepping away from his seat. "I'm not. I'm here to observe who still thinks war is easier than progress." The Kravoks commander bristled. "Watch your words, Terran. You tread close to insult." "No," Jace said simply. I walked directly toward it. Before the Kravoks could retort, the Targ general rose once more. "We grow tired of these games," he growled. "The crawl. Empire does not tolerate weakness." Jace turned to face him. "Then why did your ships retreat from the Terralin system last cycle?" The general's jaw locked. "That engagement was strategic withdrawal." "It was survival," Jace said evenly. "And the reason you survived is because a human naval commander chose not to vaporize your fleet." Gasps echoed around the table. "You think we're weak because we're soft-spoken, because we don't bristle with teeth and armor. You mistake restraint for fear." A long pause. Siler Threx whispered to his aide, "What is this man's background?" His aide trembled, slightly. "He's not a career diplomat. Officially, his file says Special Envoy for Earth Federation Interstellar Relations, but his dossier is incomplete." Siler frowned. "Meaning redacted?" "Yes, sir. Entire sections." The silence stretched in the chamber. Even the air system seemed to hush. Jace took his seat again. "Do I frighten you?" No one answered. He tapped his notebook once. "I should." The tour delegation, normally known for their impassive calm, shifted uneasily. the Mosari representative, leaned back so far he almost tipped over his floating chair. Siler was no stranger to powerful figures. He had debated with warlords, out-negotiated smugglers, stood in rooms filled with assassins and spies, but never had he seen fear ripple so quietly across a chamber without a single weapon drawn. Jace had done nothing, and that was the most unsettling thing of all. As the session ended for the evening and delegates filed out with mumbled excuses, Siler approached the human directly. "Ambassador Riven," he said coolly, "I underestimated you." Jace smiled almost warmly. "Most do." Siler paused, searching the man's eyes. "Is that intentional?" Jace gave a soft laugh. "Let me tell you something about Earth. We didn't survive because we were the strongest. We survived because we were underestimated by everything that tried to kill us. And we learned to use that." He turned to leave. Siler stood still, watching him disappear into the hallway shadows. He felt for the first time in his life outmaneuvered by someone who never even raised his voice. And somewhere deep in his mind something ancient stirred. Fear. The quiet threat. Jace Riven sat alone in his temporary quarters aboard the Orvan Prime station. The room was sleek, minimalist, sterile, designed to make every species feel equally uncomfortable. He had taken off his jacket and unbuttoned his collar, but not out of relaxation. He was still watching, still waiting. He reviewed the summit footage on a small holographic projector. Not for ego, not for performance, for patterns. The way the Targ general's posture shifted when he was challenged. The Kravox commander's flare of mandibles during threat assessment. The Yulgani's tendency to blink faster when uncertain. Each was a puzzle piece. Every species here wielded power differently, but all of them responded to fear. And right now, Jace was making them afraid. Without shouting, without drawing a weapon, just by being there. A soft chime interrupted his focus. His private comm buzzed. "Someone's at your door," the AI announced. "Let them in," Jace said. The door hissed open, revealing a woman in a sharp silver uniform. Her skin shimmered with subtle iridescence, eyes dark as midnight oceans. She stepped in with the grace of a serpent. "Security Chief Amara Vex," she introduced herself. "I've been assigned to monitor the safety of all high-level delegates, including you." Jace gestured toward the empty chair. "And by monitor, you mean interrogate," she smiled faintly. "Only the interesting ones." Jace poured a second cup of tea. "Then I suppose I should feel flattered." Vex took the seat but didn't touch the drink. "They're afraid of you." "They should be," he replied. She studied him. "You haven't made a single threat. No weapons, no backup, no formal demands. And yet, everyone in that chamber is sleeping with one eye open." Jace leaned back. "Fear doesn't always come from what you do. Sometimes it comes from what you don't." Vex's smile faded. "Who are you really?" He sipped his tea. "A diplomat." "Come on," she said, voice sharper. "You think I don't recognize predator posture when I see it? You were about to leap when that Kravox stood over you." "I was," Jace admitted, "but you didn't. Because it wasn't necessary." Silence lingered between them. Vex finally asked, "You know what the Crawl Empire is planning, don't you?" Jace nodded. "They're not here to negotiate. They're here to test the room, push boundaries, see who folds." "And Earth? We're here to remind them we don't fold." The conversation ended without ceremony. Vex stood, her expression unreadable, but before she turned to leave, she paused at the door. "I've served on this station for 12 years. I've seen bodyguards with laser eyes, negotiators with psychic dampeners, soldiers with internal fusion cores. You, Riven, you're none of that, and yet you scare me more." "That means I'm doing my job," Jace replied. When she left, he picked up his notebook again. On the last page, he scribbled a single phrase. "They don't fear Earth because we're powerful. They fear Earth because we don't show how powerful we are." Elsewhere on the station, in a shadow-cloaked chamber behind the diplomatic arena, the Crawl delegation held a secret meeting. Gorath, the Targ general, was there. So was the Kravox commander. Their voices were low, filled with venom. "This human," Gorath growled, "is more dangerous than any fleet. He has no weapons," the Kravoks hissed. "No armor. And still he unravels us." Gorath slammed a massive fist on the steel table. "We should remove him." There was agreement in the room. "Accidents happen," one of the Crawl whispered. "A malfunction. A sudden loss of oxygen in his chamber." But the Kravoks commander shook his head. "That would be suicide. If this Riven dies under suspicious circumstances, Earth will retaliate." "You think he's terrifying? Imagine what they send next." There was silence. No one dared to argue. "I want more information," Gorath muttered. "Background, habits, weaknesses. Before we strike, we must understand him." And so began the surveillance. But what they discovered only made things worse. Every record of Jace Riven was incomplete, scrubbed, redacted. His military file was locked behind 7 layers of encryption. No birth record, no public family, no off-world travel logs, just scattered references from conflicts that vanished from official records, a ghost, a weapon dressed in diplomacy. The Crawl Empire had expected to outmaneuver the human presence. Now they weren't sure the game was winnable. Meanwhile, Jace wandered the upper decks of Orvan Prime. He passed by engineers, staff, and even a few ambassadors. They gave him space, not out of courtesy, out of instinct. Predators recognize each other. He stood before the wide observation window, watching distant ships glint like fireflies against the void. His reflection stared back. Calm, unassuming, average, and that was the greatest trick of all. For centuries, species across the galaxy had mocked humanity for its weakness, its size, its simplicity. They forgot one thing. Earth was a death world, and Jace Riven was born from it. When shadows move. The following morning, the summit resumed under an eerie silence. Nothing had been said publicly, but something had shifted in the air. Whispers swirled through diplomatic circles, rumors of secret meetings, vanishing reports, and surveillance drones being scrambled in the night. Delegates arrived early but said less. Even the ever-boisterous Targ General Gorath walked with a stiffness that hadn't been there before. Jace Riven arrived precisely on time. No entourage, no escort. Just his notebook tucked under one arm and a calm expression that unsettled more than any threat could. He took his seat without a word, nodding politely to the Yulgani noble beside him, who responded with an uncertain blink of his multicolored eyes. The noble then shifted one chair away, subtle but telling. Ambassador Siler Threx observed everything from across the room. He'd studied galactic politics for over 3 decades, but he'd never seen an effect like this. Jace hadn't made demands, hadn't issued ultimatums. He had simply existed. And now 17 species were terrified of offending him. The Crawl Empire opened the session with what sounded like an olive branch, minor concessions on mining rights, a slight redraw of the contested border. But anyone who had been in the chamber long enough could see it wasn't a peace offering. It was bait. Siler knew it. So did the Kravoks. Even the Mosari delegate, who rarely understood anything outside their own rituals, tilted his head in suspicion. But, Jace? Jace just smiled and opened his notebook. "I appreciate the proposal," he said, "but I'm curious. Do the Crawl now recognize the Cyrix corridor as neutral territory? Or are they simply trying to buy time while they position military assets at the edge?" The words hit the room like a pulse grenade. Gorath's nostrils flared. "You accuse us of deception?" "No," Jace said. "I state the pattern of behavior. If I'm wrong, the diplomatic logs will show it." The Crawl fell silent. They hadn't expected him to know, and certainly not to say it so plainly. Siler tapped into his datapad and brought up security feeds. Sure enough, several stealth-class vessels had entered adjacent sectors in the last 48 hours. Now the room began to crack, not physically but politically. The Zinha hissed accusations. The Yulgani began murmuring into translator beads. Delegates stood, barked, argued. Fear had turned into panic, and Jace simply closed his notebook. "Perhaps we should take a break," he said softly, "before this conversation turns into something irreversible." No one objected. In fact, they nearly scrambled to leave the chamber. Only Siler remained seated as Jace stood and gathered his things. "You orchestrated that," the ambassador said. Jace looked at him. "I allowed the truth to be visible. That's not orchestration, that's exposure." Siler studied the man closely. "You knew about the stealth ships. You waited for the crawl to offer terms so you could publicly reveal their deception. Timing is everything. And what now? You've embarrassed them. That makes them dangerous." Jace paused. "They were already dangerous. But now, so are we." He left the room with the calm of a man walking through a garden. Siler stared after him, trying to reconcile this unassuming creature with the living force that just cracked a centuries-old empire's facade in 30 seconds of calm speech. Meanwhile, in the restricted sector of the station, Security Chief Amara Vex was analyzing more than just surveillance feeds. Her terminal flickered with encrypted messages. Someone, multiple parties actually, had tried to breach Jace Riven's quarters during the night. All attempts had failed. One assailant was now in medical stasis with shattered limbs and a nervous system in disarray. No alarms had been triggered. No cameras had caught the attacker entering. Just the aftermath. Bone fragments embedded in the corridor walls, a blood smear across the ceiling, and a trail of broken pride. Amara sat back in her chair, arms crossed, brow furrowed. She activated the footage again. In one freeze frame, the assailant, a trained mercenary from the Orvac Syndicate, was seen crumpled on the floor outside Jace's door. A note had been left pinned to his chest. It read, "Don't knock, just ask." She didn't laugh. It was too cold for that. Back in the upper atrium, Jace sat at the edge of a long, curved bench overlooking the station's Starview gallery. Above him, gas giants swirled in blue and red hues. Distant suns painted gold streaks across the ceiling glass. He watched it all quietly, his mind still, but his senses hyper-aware. Two Mosari passed behind him. One whispered something in a language older than written time. The Death Whisperer, it said. Jace didn't turn, didn't react, but inside he sighed. That name again. It always came when the fear started to outpace the facts. He didn't enjoy it. Not really. The power, the perception, the myth. It was a tool, nothing more. But tools had weight, and the heavier they became, the more dangerous they were to carry. Behind him, someone cleared their throat. It was the Yulgani noble. "I believe we're ready to vote," he said, voice uncertain. Jace stood, smiled. "Then let's make sure we all understand what we're really voting on." The strike beneath the flag. The final vote was scheduled for the following morning. Each delegation had returned to their quarters after the previous session, but none truly rested. Even those who were not traditionally bound by sleep, like the Kravoks, who operated on nutrient cycles rather than circadian rhythms, remained in their chambers longer than usual, reconsidering centuries of strategy. Security on Orvan Prime doubled overnight. Tactical drones patrolled every level. Bioscanners swept for explosives. Guards from 6 species operated with full authorization to respond to any threat with lethal force. It wasn't paranoia, it was prudence. After what Jace Riven had revealed, no one doubted the possibility of sabotage. Not even Jace himself. He sat alone in his darkened room, his fingers steepled, elbows resting on the edge of his desk. The dim glow of Earth's insignia pulsed faintly on the wall screen behind him, blue and white, a symbol of diplomacy. But diplomacy, Jace knew, was only effective if backed by the credible threat of consequences. He wasn't a man obsessed with war. He was a man obsessed with balance. And balance, he understood better than most, required leverage. Suddenly his comm chirped. A voice, breathless and urgent, crackled through. It was Security Chief Amara Vex. "We have a breach in the lower atmospheric control hub." Unregistered movement, crawl signatures confirmed. Jace stood calm as ever. Are they targeting the summit? No. They're targeting the oxygen systems. If they control that, they control life support for half the diplomatic wing. Stalling the vote, Jace said. Or worse, Vex replied. Understood, I'll handle it. There was silence on the line, then, You'll what? I'll handle it, he repeated. Riven. Protocol requires. He closed the connection. Jace reached into the drawer of his desk and removed a small black case. Inside were no weapons, at least not in the traditional sense. A pair of gloves, made of pressure-reactive material, a length of carbon thread filament, a palm-sized device that could override most locks on the station. None of it was military issue. All of it was effective. Deep below the summit chambers, 3 crawl operatives slithered silently through a maintenance shaft. Their dark, segmented bodies moved with trained grace. They wore adaptive cloaks that blurred their outlines, and their weapons were tuned to kill without noise or mess. They reached the access panel to the atmospheric control node. One tapped on his wrist console, unlocking the hatch. Then something landed behind them with a soft, almost apologetic tap. By the time they turned, Jace was already moving. The first went down with a short pulse from the lock override device, its edge digging sharply into a vulnerable ridge behind the left eye cluster. No blood, just instant unconsciousness. The second swung a blade, too slow. Jace ducked under the blow and looped the filament wire around the attacker's neck in a single motion. He didn't pull hard, just enough. The crawl thrashed, then dropped. The third froze. Jace straightened slowly. Not breathing hard, not even flushed. I'm going to give you a choice, he said to the last remaining operative. Leave now, run, and tell your commander something important. The crawl stared, confused. Jace tossed the gloves aside and stepped closer. His voice dropped. Tell him this isn't a negotiation. It's a courtesy. Next time I won't offer it. The operative bolted. Jace watched him go, then turned and secured the panel again, locking it with a code no one else on the station had access to. Above him, the summit chamber waited. The final session began at high noon station time. Delegates filed in, uneasy but determined. The crawl delegation entered last, Sans their commander. Rumors spread instantly. Some said he was ill, others said he'd been recalled. But those who knew stayed quiet. Jace arrived without ceremony. He nodded to Chief Vex, who stood just inside the chamber door. Her face betrayed nothing, but her slight nod told him everything. The incident was being contained. The vote proceeded. 17 voices. 17 decisions. 1 treaty. The Syrinx Accord was ratified with near unanimity. Only the crawl abstained. When it was done, there was no applause. Just a long, collective exhale. Siler Threx approached Jace after the session. You knew they would try something, he said. I suspected. You stopped them. I handled it. The Yulgani noble approached. Next. Earth will have enforcement presence on the corridor? Yes, Jace said, but only as observers. We're not interested in occupying space, just keeping it stable. And if the crawl resist again? The Kravox delegate asked from behind him. Jace turned slightly. His eyes didn't flash. His voice didn't raise. Then we'll remind them why death worlds make such good peacekeepers. And again, silence. Later, alone on the observation deck, Jace stood with his hands behind his back, staring into the cold brilliance of the stars. Chief Vex appeared beside him. They'll come again, she said. Maybe not tomorrow, but they'll come. They always do, he replied. She hesitated. Do you enjoy this? The fear? He looked at her, truly looked for the first time. No, but I understand it, and I use it. Because if fear keeps the galaxy from burning, then so be it. He turned back to the stars. Fear is the last language before war, and sometimes it's the only one anyone listens to. The legend wears a suit. The corridors of Orvan Prime buzzed with a new kind of energy in the days following the treaty signing. Not celebration, not relief, but awareness. Something had changed, and not just the political landscape. The delegates walked softer now, looked over their shoulders more often. There was less arrogance in the way they held themselves, more calculation in every gesture. They had faced a force they didn't fully understand, and they had survived only because it allowed them to. Jace Riven had returned to his quarters, declined all press briefings, and made no public declarations. He didn't need to. The story had already spread. Some said he had single-handedly disarmed 4 Crawl assassins. Others whispered about the secret footage, blurry, shaky angles of him moving like a phantom, ending threats before they became chaos. Most didn't know the details. They only knew the effect. Siler Threx sat at his terminal, reviewing interstellar news feeds. The headlines didn't mention Earth's diplomat by name, but between the lines, everyone knew. Human Federation reasserts influence after Cyrix resolution. Crawl Empire retreats from corridor negotiations following unspecified incidents. Galactic balance shifts after tense summit on Orvan Prime. He shook his head slowly. He had spent his career believing power came from visibility, from bold declarations and shining fleets, but this was the quiet storm, the shadow at the edge of the spotlight. He tapped his communicator and requested access to the private summit logs, security footage, transcripts, and most importantly, the personnel file of Jace Riven. Access denied. Level 12, diplomatic clearance. Insufficient. Siler leaned back, unsettled. They had sent a man the galaxy couldn't research. He looked at the screen again, then deleted all copies of his inquiry. Some things, he decided, were better left unpursued. In a dim-lit bar 2 levels, below the ambassadorial housing wing, alien officers whispered over drinks made from 7 different atmospheres. One, a Krenth pilot with half of his face replaced by chromatic grafts, told a story of watching Riven subdue a Mosari rebel with a broken glass and a spoon. Another, a Vargan trader who had once visited Earth, explained that humans could kill you with laughter, caffeine, or silence. Sometimes all 3 at once. None of the stories were the same, but all carried a weight that no military display could match. Even the station's security drones began auto-adjusting their threat assessment parameters for humans. Not because of a formal order, but because machine learning adapted to fear just like anything else. Amara Vex, chief of station security, updated her logs without details. She cited incident neutralization performed by third-party non-aggressive agent and locked the file behind encryption keyed to her DNA. When her junior officers asked who Jace Riven was, she simply said, someone who didn't need a weapon to be one. Jace, for his part, made no attempts to build alliances or seek acknowledgement. He spent the next day walking the far wings of the station. He visited the hydro gardens, spoke with a maintenance engineer about gravity fluctuations, stopped to watch a Mosari child attempting to mimic dance routines seen on human broadcasts. He smiled faintly and offered a tip on footwork. The child didn't know who he was, didn't need to. That was the point. Fear had its place. But respect, that had to be earned differently. Later, when he returned to his quarters, a message waited for him. Text only, no signature. They will test us again. Earth must be ready. Jace deleted it without reading twice. He already was. The day before his departure, he received an unannounced visitor. Ambassador Siler. Jace opened the door without surprise. Didn't expect you to knock. I considered the alternatives, Siler said, stepping inside. Jace motioned toward the seat opposite the window. Tea? No. Answers. Jace sat. Answers are heavier than tea. Siler leaned forward. You could have humiliated the Crawl. You could have demanded sanctions, military presence, reparations, but you didn't. Jace tilted his head. Why would I? Their fear is already a currency. Forcing them further only guarantees future war. Siler was quiet a moment. Then, who trained you? Jace didn't answer. Instead, he rose and moved to the window. You see that star cluster? He said. Out there's a system called Demetra 9. 5 moons, 2 suns. Beautiful place. Peaceful now. But 15 years ago, it was the site of a war started by arrogance. One side thought their numbers were enough. The other thought they were too small to win. And, Seiler asked, Earth sent 5 diplomats, no weapons, just minds trained to predict how wars start before the soldiers are even born. The war ended without a shot. And you were one of them. No, Jace said. I was still learning. But I watched, I listened, and I understood. He turned to face Seiler. Sometimes the best weapon is a lesson remembered. Seiler stood. Then I'll remember this one. As he left, he paused in the doorway. You know they'll write legends about you? I hope not, Jace said. Legends make people forget that monsters wear teeth, not suits. The next morning, Jace Riven stepped aboard the Earth Federation's shuttle without ceremony. He didn't look back at the station. But from every viewing window, from every camera feed, beings from 17 species watched him leave. He was now a name that would not be forgotten. A diplomat from a fragile-looking species on a death world. A man with no armor, no claws, no guns. Just patience and precision. And that was enough to terrify empires. The Death World Doctrine. The shuttle carrying Jace Riven disappeared into the void, swallowed by the quiet silver of warp space. Orvin Prime returned to its routines, resupply, navigation routes, diplomatic updates. But the shadow he left behind didn't fade with the ship. Instead, it settled deep, into protocol manuals, into whispered officer briefings, into the way senior ambassadors reviewed seating charts when future humans were scheduled to attend. In the days following his departure, the newly ratified Cyrix Accord began reshaping the region. Patrols were established, trade resumed. Even factions that had long refused to share airspace found themselves reluctantly aligned under the watchful language of the treaty. And at the heart of the agreement was a clause quietly inserted by Jace himself: Federation oversight, non-negotiable. No. One contested it. Not because they agreed with it, but because no one wanted to explain to Earth why they would dare object. Somewhere on Earth, in a quiet subterranean wing of the Federation Diplomatic Corps, a tribunal debriefed the summit with full sensory recordings, audio, visual, neural imprints. They saw everything. The calm with which Jace Riven entered the chamber, the lethal elegance with which he neutralized 4 crawl assassins with nothing but improvised objects, the cold restraint he exercised when he could have ended lives and chose diplomacy instead. One senior evaluator leaned back in his chair. I thought we retired the Death World Doctrine, he said. The room fell silent. Across from him, a woman with silver-streaked hair shook her head. We didn't retire it. We just stopped needing to use it. But, now? She looked at the screen, where Jace Riven was frozen mid-step in the corridor outside the summit chamber, notebook under one arm, expression unreadable. Now we remind them why we have it. In a training center on Mars, new recruits for Earth's interstellar diplomatic program watched fragments of the Orvin Prime footage. Jace's face never appeared directly, but his actions, his stillness, his control, were analyzed in slow-motion breakdowns. An instructor paced before the students, his voice steady. Everyone wants to be heard. That's basic. But in a room full of roaring beasts, the quietest, one is either a fool or the apex predator. He pointed to the screen. Jace Riven never raised his voice, never threatened. But 17 species now write their treaties with Earth's tone in mind. That's not charisma, that's design. A hand went up. Sir, was he enhanced? The instructor shook his head. No implants, no serum, no tech, just human conditioning, and growing up on a planet that tried to kill him every day. He clicked to the next slide. Death World Doctrine, what it means to the galaxy on Orvin Prime. Chief Amara Vex stood before a new security rotation. She carried no weapons on her. She didn't need to. Her name alone now commanded more attention since her incident report. had leaked. Just enough. One of her guards approached her after briefing. "Is it true, Chief?" he asked quietly. "That the human took down 4 crawl by himself?" She raised an eyebrow. "Why? You want to confirm it?" "No, ma'am." "Good," she said, "because confirmation is irrelevant. The belief alone does the work." She walked off without another word. Far away, in the capital world of the Crawl Empire, Chancellor Goreth stood before a war table displaying sectors and fleets. The Crawl had recovered most of their losses: military, political, economic. Their outer colonies had stabilized, but none of the advisors in the war chamber mentioned Earth. Not directly. Not anymore. Not after Orvin Prime. One junior general, newly promoted, cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should reevaluate our posture toward the Human Federation." Goreth's massive claws clenched subtly. "We do not fear primitives." The room didn't respond. The general tried again. "No, sir, but we must acknowledge what happened. A single representative shifted power on neutral ground. That's not primitive, that's calculated." Goreth turned to the star map. He tapped the Cyrix corridor, then the border near Earth space. "Keep our fleets away from human trade routes," he growled. There was no debate, and on a quiet hill overlooking the Pacific Ocean, Jace Riven sat beneath a wind-bent tree. He had no title now. No briefings, no security detail, just a cup of coffee and the sound of waves striking the shore. A child nearby flew a drone in loops. An elderly couple argued over the best route to reach the lighthouse. A young girl sat beside him on the bench eating something, bright and sweet. "You're that guy from the treaty," she said suddenly. Jace looked at her. "I've seen the vids," she added. "You're scary." He smiled. "No, I'm just prepared." "Prepared for what?" "For people who think fear is the only way to win." She looked at him thoughtfully. "But you didn't scare people with weapons." He looked out at the horizon. "No, I scared them with the idea that we don't need them." The girl grinned. "That's even scarier." She skipped away. Jace leaned back, letting the wind pass through him. He wasn't a legend. He wasn't a warrior. He was just a man from Earth. A man shaped by a world built to destroy weakness, and a lifetime of understanding that strength isn't what you show, it's what you hold back.